Welcome to Universe of Love and Anime, where love stories are told with all your heart. Before we begin our emotional journey today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who needs a story that is healing, hopeful, and humane. Each of your support not only motivates us, but also spreads love to more people. Thank you for choosing to stop by Universe of Love and Anime, and now, let's listen to this heart-touching story. Growing Heart. He called me a maid at our dinner party, and the room erupted in laughter, wine glasses clinking like applause for his cruelty. What Richard didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while he bathed in the shallow approval of his colleagues, I had already drained our joint accounts, packed up my belongings, and secured the most ruthless divorce lawyer in the city. Tonight wasn't just dinner, it was the final course of our marriage, and I was about to serve the one dish best served cold: revenge. The dining room looked perfect under the chandelier's glow, the roast lamb with rosemary potatoes resting beautifully on the china I had arranged with care, fresh flowers blooming in the antique vase my mother once gave us, and candles flickering like they were in on the secret. Richard had insisted on inviting his colleagues over, just like he always did before asking for a raise or angling for a promotion. My role? As always, to make him look good. "Honey, he's outdone you," Richard said with a broad smile, lifting the wine I had selected, swirled, and decanted to perfection. His voice oozed affection for the performance, not the person. I smiled politely, but there was nothing warm behind it. I'd spent all day preparing the meal, right after submitting a major proposal that landed me the senior marketing director position, news that had yet to be shared with anyone at this table. To them, I was just Richard's wife, the pleasant hostess who managed the house and entertained his guests. "Alexandra is too modest," he continued, placing a hand on my lower back with practiced intimacy that felt more like a brand than affection. "She has a real gift for keeping things perfect at home, don't you, darling?" David, already tipsy from his third glass, chuckled. "You're lucky, Richard. My wife can't even boil an egg." The other wives gave me polite smiles, tight-lipped and practiced, like women who had learned to play a part. I recognized the resignation in their eyes. I took a seat as Richard began carving the lamb, launching into his latest financial strategy with his boss. I poured water, passed bread, and nodded in the right place, me body moving through a routine it had memorized long ago. "Richard tells us you worked in marketing before choosing to focus on domestic life," said Trevor, trying to include me. Before I could answer, Richard laughed. "She worked in the department, yes, but she wasn't an executive. More of a party planner, really. Remember the Johnson account mess, sweetheart?" The Johnson account had been my biggest success. I'd saved it after Richard's team nearly lost it. The client had sent me a handwritten note of thanks. "It all worked out in the end," I said softly. "Only because I stepped in," Richard added, turning back to Trevor. "She realized her talents were better suited for managing the household. And she's amazing at it." That tightness returned to my chest, the same one I'd felt in every belittling conversation for the past 7 years. What began as harmless jokes had become a pattern of public humiliation masked as teasing. "Are you still working?" Christine asked, genuinely curious. "She does a bit of consulting," Richard answered before I could speak. "Just enough to stay busy between our events and the house." "Actually," I said, surprising even myself, "I was promoted to senior marketing director last month. We landed the Westfield account just last week." Silence swept the table. Richard's smile faltered. "That's incredible," Christine said, her interest sincere. "Westfield is massive. How did you manage that?" "It's just a small account," Richard interrupted. "Alexandra helps with their social media. Nothing too demanding." I had restructured their entire brand strategy. But I didn't correct him. I just raised my glass. "Let me clear the plates," I said, standing. "She's great at that," Richard joked, turning to David. "Executive by day, maid by night. At least here, she knows her true place." Laughter followed. Some was awkward. Some wasn't. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I stood frozen with the plates in my hands, not because I was shocked this wasn't new, but because suddenly I was done. I caught Christine's eyes widen in realization, Trevor's brow furrow, and the subtle flinch on the other wives' faces. In that crystalline moment, I saw everything for what it truly was. I walked into the kitchen, gripped the marble countertop, and looked down at the diamond ring that had once symbolized Richard's success more than our love. But instead of humiliation, I felt calm. Cold, clear calm. The kind that only comes when you know something is over. I pulled out my phone and finally texted the number I had saved for weeks. "I'm ready. Let's proceed." The reply came instantly. "Documents are ready. Meeting at 9. Just say the word." I put the phone away, finished plating the dessert, dark chocolate soufflés garnished with mint, and returned to the dining room with a smile that, for the first time in years, felt real. "Sorry to keep you waiting," I said with a calm smile as I served each guest carefully, my movements graceful and unhurried. Some things can't be rushed if you want them to be perfect, and tonight, I needed everything to be flawless. Richard chuckled as I leaned over to pour his wine, his hand patting my hip like I was some obedient pet. "That's why I keep her around," he said, earning another round of chuckles. "She's worth every penny I don't pay her." This time, I laughed too, but unlike theirs, my laughter carried a hidden edge, a secret that none of them could possibly hear. As the room returned to idle chatter, I caught Christine watching me, her eyes sharper than before. When our gazes met, she gave me a subtle nod, not pity, not sympathy, but something else. Understanding. Approval, perhaps. I returned it with a soft nod of my own. The evening unfolded exactly as Richard intended, his over-rehearsed stories, his boasts about minor workplace victories, his guests marveling at our decor and polished hospitality, their wives chatting about vacation plans and school tuition. Richard was radiant, feeding off the praise and convinced that the night was another feather in his cap. After the last guest had left, he slumped onto the sofa, loosening his tie with a self-satisfied sigh. "Perfect," he murmured. Trevor basically guaranteed that Philip Steele. "Pour me another whiskey, will you?" I handed him the glass without a word. He didn't thank me, didn't look up from his phone, just took it like it was owed. "I'm going to finish cleaning," I said. "Leave it for tomorrow," he replied absently. "Go to bed early. We've got dinner with the Millers tomorrow. Wear that blue dress I like." "Sure." I lied, my voice steady. Instead of going upstairs, I locked myself in the home office and retrieved the folder I'd hidden in the bottom drawer, disguised as tax paperwork. Inside were financial documents, photos, records, a lease agreement, and most importantly, the contact information for Diana Wells, the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city. I added fresh notes from tonight, including Richard's little-made remark, and allowed myself a small, private smile. He thought I was just clearing plates, but I was clearing the stage for his exit. Next week's dinner party would be his last as my husband, and the guests would have a very different show. The next morning, I woke before Richard, slipped out of bed quietly, and wrapped myself in the silk robe he'd given me the year he handed out luxury gifts to impress his bosses. I stood still for a moment, watching him sleep. There was a time when I loved him, when his confidence had felt charming rather than oppressive. Back then, I thought I was choosing a partner, not a prison. In the kitchen, I moved through the motions of our morning routine. I made his protein shake, prepped his newspaper, laid out his clothes, even ironed the shirt he liked best. Every move felt surreal, like acting in a play I no longer believed in. Today would be the last time I played this role. By 8:30, I was dressed in the Armani suit he once mocked for making me look too ambitious. My makeup was pristine, my hair cut sharp, my expression unreadable. When I told him I had an early meeting, he barely glanced up. "Don't be late for the Millers tonight," he mumbled. "And wear heels. You know how short you look next to me." "Of course," I said with a pleasant tone. But I wouldn't be there. I drove downtown to WSAN and Associates, where the receptionist greeted me like an old friend. "Ms. Wells is expecting you," she said, leading me into a sun-drenched corner office. Diana Wells stood as I entered, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, her expression unreadable yet powerful. "Alexandra," she said, skipping the formalities. "I've reviewed your materials." "Impressive work." "I've had time to plan," I replied, placing my folder on her desk. I added last night's notes. She glanced over the new additions, her eyes pausing on the highlighted comment about me being a maid. Verbal abuse accumulates, she said simply. And this file documents years of it. You've built a solid case. I should have left earlier. Most people wait too long. What matters is that you're here now. Let's talk assets. I handed her a USB drive. This has everything. Accounts, passwords, 5 years of statements. I'm the primary earner, though he acts like I'm his secretary. My salary is double his. My bonuses last year were more than he made total. Diana's brow arched. He's been hiding funds. Offshore transfers $30,000 a month. I trace them. Smart, she nodded. Most never find out. I do our taxes. Richard thinks money is beneath him. Diana smiled coldly. That'll work in our favor. What about the house? Bought it before marriage. It's in my name, though he tells everyone otherwise. Mortgage nearly paid off. For the next hour, we built a strategy. Diana was quick, brilliant, precise. She outlined how we'd secure my assets, file for separation, and preemptively counter any false claims from Richard. When should we file? She asked. I want it served during next week's dinner party. That's a very specific request. It's the right time, I said. He's invited clients, his boss, even joked about a colleague whose wife left him in public. He plans to lie about a promotion that doesn't exist. And you want to end it there? Diana asked, not judging. I want to end it on my terms, in my time, with everyone watching. He made me feel invisible for years. Now I want them all to see what he truly is. And what I'm not. Diana nodded, completely understanding. Public consequences for public humiliation, her tone calm and methodical. I'll have someone serve the papers at the dinner, she said. One of my staff can pose as a waiter. He's done it before. I thanked her and left her office feeling lighter than I had in years. The next stop was Alpine Financial Advisors across town, a sleek glass tower where Michael Chin, the financial planner Diana recommended, was waiting. After reviewing my situation, he didn't waste time. We need to move quickly, he said. Today, if possible. Within a few hours, I had opened new accounts at a different bank, transferred my personal savings, rerouted my next paycheck, and documented Richard's suspicious offshore transfers. Michael helped me secure my retirement accounts and investments beyond Richard's legal reach. He's going to be furious, Michael warned. That's why timing is everything, I replied. My final appointment of the day was with Dr. Sarah Johnson, the therapist I'd been seeing in secret for 6 months. Her warm, inviting office, filled with low light and leafy plants, immediately made me feel grounded. You look different today, she observed as I took my seat. I've made up my mind, I said, the words steady. How do you feel? Strangely calm. Like I've finally stopped drowning. We talked for nearly an hour about boundaries, grief, and preparing for the emotional warfare Richard would likely unleash. He'll twist things, Sarah reminded me. He'll use guilt, rage, charm, whatever gives him control. You have to remember, you are not the villain here. Exactly, I whispered. I just need to keep that truth close. You're taking your life back, she said. Afterward, I checked my phone. 3 texts from Richard, each one more agitated. He was irritated that I hadn't responded about the Miller's dinner and irritated that I hadn't picked up. I replied simply, saying I'd been in back-to-back meetings but would handle everything tonight. As I drove home to prepare for the performance ahead, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the name made me pause. Christine Baster, Trevor's wife from the dinner party. I answered cautiously. Hi, this is Kristen who met last night. I hope it's okay, but I got your number from the school's fundraiser contact list. Of course, I replied, curious. I just wanted to check on you. What Richard said last night. I recognized the way you looked afterward. I've had that look too. I pulled into a nearby lot and parked. Her words hit deeper than I expected. I'm handling it, I said, choosing each word with care. I left my first husband after comments like that, she continued. Everyone thought we had the perfect marriage, but behind the scenes, he was slowly erasing who I was. I drew in a breath. How did you get out? Not gracefully, she admitted. But I rebuilt. Trevor is nothing like him. He respects me, treats me like an equal. She hesitated. I hope I'm not overstepping. I just saw myself in you last night. You're not, I said quietly. You called at the perfect time, actually. I paused, then decided to trust her. I'm leaving Richard. Soon. Oh, she said, exhaling. Do you have somewhere to go? People to support you? I've been planning this for months. Everything's in place. Good, she said with relief. Trevor mentioned Richard's been making shady financial moves. Off-the-record conversations with competitors. If that's helpful, I could. It is, I interrupted gently. Thank you, Christine. Women should look out for each other, she replied simply. If you need anything to witness a safe place, just someone to talk to, I am here. I promised to keep in touch and hung up, unexpectedly emotional. Richard had spent years isolating me from friendships, claiming other women were petty, dramatic, or not worth my time. But now, I was finding allies in places I never expected. That evening, I prepared the Miller's dinner as if nothing had changed. Richard walked in at 7:30 and immediately started critiquing my wine selection and appetizer choices. I nodded, adjusted what he asked, and mentally logged each condescending word for later. On the drive to the restaurant, he glanced over and asked, "Why are you so quiet?" "Just tired," I said. "Long day at work." He snorted. "What could be so exhausting? It's not like you're out closing million-dollar deals." I smiled faintly, hiding the fact that just last week, I had closed a $3 million deal with no help from him or his firm. I had learned to swallow my victories like bitter pills, served cold and in silence. 7 days remained. 7 more performances as the obliging wife. But then, everything would change. 2 days before the dinner, I received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line made my pulse quicken. Your husband and Melissa. I opened it with trembling fingers. Attached was a photo of Richard with his assistant, wrapped in an embrace outside a boutique hotel downtown. Their kiss wasn't clumsy or hesitant, it was the kiss of 2 people who had done this often. Despite the numbness I'd built, a sharp ache pierced through. It wasn't even jealousy. It was the insult, the hypocrisy, the fact that he'd made me feel guilty for every late night while he was living a lie. I forwarded the image to Diana immediately with a note. Another piece for the file. Her reply came fast. This strengthens your case. But I need to see you urgently. There's more. 3 hours later, I sat across from her as she laid out financial records that chilled me to my core. He's been funneling money from his company through your joint account, she explained, pointing to a series of highlighted transactions. It appears he's been embezzling and using your account as a temporary shell before moving funds offshore. My throat tightened. That implicates me. Diana's eyes didn't waver. I know. But it also gives us leverage if we move fast and control the narrative.
Exactly.
If this is discovered after you've filed for divorce, it could look like you're making accusations to cover your own involvement. I leaned back, trying to process the weight of this new threat. So, what now? I asked, my voice quieter than before. We expedite everything, Diana said with sharp decisiveness. And we add the financial misconduct to our case. I've already contacted a forensic accountant. I nodded slowly, absorbing it all. As I drove home, my phone rang. Richard, sounding unusually cheerful. Great news, honey, he beamed. Trevor just called. They're fast-tracking my promotion. We have to celebrate. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. That's amazing, I said, keeping my voice even. What does this mean? More money, more influence, and get this, his voice dropped to a smug whisper. They want me to head the new office in Singapore. We're moving at the end of the month. I nearly veered off the road.
Singapore.
Half a world away. Away from my job, my support, everything I had built. The perfect trap. That sudden, I managed. I've been working toward this for months, he said, a note of irritation creeping in. You'd know if you paid more attention to my career instead of your little marketing projects. Sure, I replied automatically, swallowing the scream inside. We'll talk more tonight. Oh, and I invited Trevor and Christine over next week. Make it special, it'll be our going-away party. I hung up and pulled over, trembling. Singapore would destroy everything I'd planned. I called Diana immediately. We have to file earlier. Richard plans to move us abroad before the month ends. That complicates things, she said, clearly calculating. International relocations shift jurisdiction. We must act fast. We'll file next week, no delays. That evening, Richard came home with champagne and my favorite takeout. My stomach churned. He only brought surprise gifts when he had something to hide. To us, he said, clinking his glass with mine, and to Singapore. I've already seen a gorgeous place on the 40th floor pool, gym. Amazing view. I smiled, nodding, letting him ramble about expat perks and tax benefits. Inside, I was reviewing my escape plan step by step. You're quiet, he noted. Aren't you excited? I put my glass down carefully. It's just a lot to process. My work, my friends, my family, everything is here. His face hardened. Your job isn't a real career, Alexandra. You can pick up something else. Or maybe stop working altogether. Enjoy being a proper executive's wife. My maid in Singapore instead of here. The words slipped before I could stop them. You really said that out loud. Richard narrowed his eyes. What did you say? I stepped back.
Nothing.
I'm just overwhelmed. I'm happy for your success. He watched me for a moment longer, then seemed to buy the act. Start packing this weekend. I'll call the agent to sell the house. House of cards, I thought. Later, I locked myself in the guest bathroom and called Megan, my sister who lived 3 states away. Over the years, Richard had convinced me she was toxic, always labeling her as a bad influence whenever I questioned him. He's moving you to Singapore, she gasped when I explained. He's trying, I clarified, but I won't let it happen. I'm leaving next week. Silence. Really? You've said that before. I know, I whispered. But this time is different. I hired a lawyer. I've moved my accounts. I have a place lined up. Thank God, Megan breathed. Do you want me to come now? Not yet. Maybe after, if things get messy. My door's always open. And Alex? I'm proud of you. Her words pierced something in me. When was the last time anyone said that to me? Richard never praised me. Not when I won clients, not when I kept our home running. Only disapproval. Always disappointment. The next morning, I returned from a run to find Richard in my office's laptop open, his fingers near the drawer where I kept my exit plan. What are you doing? I asked, struggling to keep my voice calm. Checking flights, he said, eyes narrowing. Unless there's something here you don't want me to find. I forced a smile. Of course not. Just surprised. You never come in here. It's my little hobby corner, remember? He grunted. Your password was easy. Be more careful next time. Warning or challenge, I couldn't tell. Thankfully, all important files were under encrypted cloud storage, but the physical folder me entire strategy was in the bottom drawer, just feet from him. I'm going to shower, I said, forcing myself to walk away naturally. Then breakfast. Once I heard him go upstairs, I dashed back in and relocated the folder, stuffing it into the lining of my winter coat in the guest room. Temporary, but safe for now. That afternoon, a crisis erupted at work. A client emergency, and my boss turned to me apologetically. Alexandra, I'm sorry to ask, but we need someone at the Chicago meeting Monday. Your best option. Monday. The day I was meant to sign final papers with Diana. I can't, I said, surprising even myself. I have a personal appointment I can't reschedule. He raised his brows. In 5 years, I had never declined a business request. Understood, he said quietly. Whatever it is, I hope it goes well. I nodded and walked away, my heart pounding. Saying no to someone besides Richard was harder than I thought, but it felt like taking my first real breath in years. Did I ask everything okay? He asked, and for a split second, I considered telling him the truth. Robert had always been fair, steady, the exact opposite of how Richard described him. But instead, I just nodded and said it would be okay soon. I only needed Monday. He gave me a long, searching look and nodded. I'll send Marcus. You'll need to prep him.
Sure, I said.
Thanks. That night, as Richard slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the woman I used to be: ambitious, outspoken, alive with dreams of creative leadership and real achievement. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Richard had chipped away at all of that, leaving only doubt and hesitation behind. He'd called me a servant, and even now the sting of that word stayed with me. But lying there, I felt no rage.
No grief.
Just finality. The ending was already written. All that remained was to carry out the final act. In 6 days, Richard would be handed the consequences of his behavior, served in front of the very people whose opinions he valued more than my own. Diana had confirmed everything. The server was ready. The papers were signed. And for once, I wasn't afraid. The day of the dinner arrived clear and crisp, an autumn morning that felt like the first page of a new chapter. I rose before Richard, watching the sky glow from behind our bedroom window. Today would change everything. Over breakfast, Richard barely looked up from his phone. What time will you be home? We need time to get started. His tone was more commanding than curious. I told him I had taken the day off, then served him coffee exactly the way he liked it. One last time. I want everything to be perfect for your big announcement, I said with a practiced smile. He looked at me, surprised by my enthusiasm. Trevor's bringing the regional VP. We need everything flawless. It will be, I said. An unforgettable night. Richard left with a kiss on the cheek and a reminder about the wine's temperature and the shirt that needed ironing. I shut the door behind him and leaned against it, letting myself enjoy the quiet. He had no idea. I spent the morning re-cleaning our already spotless home, then drove to a downtown boutique where I had reserved a striking white suit, sharp, tailored, powerful. Not the blue dress Richard had requested. The saleswoman helping me smiled and whispered, "Someone's making a statement." I returned the smile. You have no idea. In the afternoon, while preparing hors d'oeuvres, I got a call from Diana's office. Everything in place? She asked.
Yes.
8 total, dinner at 7. James will arrive at 7:45 disguised as catering staff. He'll wait for your signal. He's composed, discreet, and impossible to rattle. And everything's legally solid? Triple-checked. Proper notice, documented delivery, airtight. Just after I hung up, Christine sent a message. You've got this. You're stronger than you know. Her quiet support over the past 2 weeks had become unexpectedly essential. Without knowing the exact plan, she understood enough to be present without overstepping. At 5 p.m., the catering crew arrived. I had insisted on hiring them despite Richard's resistance. You don't need help, he had said. You've always done it alone. But tonight, I wouldn't be alone. Sophia, the team lead, winked at me. The special server arrives at 7:45. We'll fold him into the team. I thanked her and went upstairs to get ready. I applied my makeup slowly, precisely, accentuating my natural features without overdoing it. I pulled my hair into a sleek bun, one Richard had once called too severe for your face. Around my neck, I wore an heirloom emerald necklace from my grandmother, one I had stopped wearing because Richard said it looked cheap. At 6:30, I stood in the entryway surveying the space. The china gleamed under the chandelier. The air smelled of fresh flowers and roasted rosemary lamb. Everything looked exquisite. Richard walked in at 6:45 and immediately began inspecting. The lilies might be too much. Trevor's wife is allergic, isn't she? I checked, I said smoothly. They're fine. He raised a brow at my outfit. Not the blue dress? This felt more appropriate. He looked like he was going to argue but glanced at the clock instead.
Fine.
But next time, where would I ask? There wouldn't be a next time. I nodded. The guests began arriving at 7 o'clock. Trevor and Christine, the regional VP and his wife, two Japanese investors that Richard hoped to win over for the Singapore transition. He was radiant, charming, the perfect host. I played my part equally well, welcoming, composed, gracious. Alexandra's outdone herself, Richard boasted mid-toast. She always makes these nights shine. Christine caught my eye and gave a small, knowing nod. Course by course, the dinner flowed seamlessly, the room filled with laughter, small talk, and the sound of cutlery against porcelain. Richard performed like a man on stage, weaving in stories of career triumphs and sprinkled charm. At 7:43, I saw James enter through the back hallway in uniform, indistinguishable from the rest of the staff. He nodded once at Sophia. 2 minutes later, he began circulating the room, refilling wine glasses and clearing salad plates. Then, he stood by the kitchen doorway, waiting for the signal. My heart beat steadily. I reached for my glass and gently tapped the side with a fork, drawing attention. Before dessert, I said, smiling, I want to say thank you to all of you for supporting Richard, for your kindness. Tonight marks a turning point. There was a murmur of polite curiosity. Richard looked puzzled but pleased. As you know, Richard has an exciting opportunity ahead. I paused. And I have one of my own. I gave James the signal. He stepped forward and handed Richard a white envelope. Mr. Kingsley. Yes. James said nothing else, handed over the papers, and returned to the kitchen like a ghost. Richard frowned, opened the envelope, and froze. The silence in the room was instant and sharp. What the hell is this? He finally spat. Your official notification, I said, my voice calm. I've filed for divorce. There was a beat, the kind of pause that fractures rooms. You chose this moment, he hissed, his mask slipping. You humiliated me. No, I said. You did that yourself. I'm just returning the favor with legal backing. His face turned red. You'll regret this. I already have. For 7 years. And just like that, I stood tall, lifted my glass, and toasted to the woman I used to be finally coming home. The conversation flowed effortlessly, with Richard basking in the center of attention as he recited his polished anecdotes and business philosophies like a well-rehearsed actor. I smiled politely, nodded at appropriate moments, refilled glasses, and played the part of the supportive wife, as I always had. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. At 7:43, I quietly excused myself to check on dessert and walked into the kitchen where Sophia and her team were preparing the final course. He's here, she whispered, nodding toward a tall man dressed identically to the other waiters. James gave me a single, subtle nod, his expression unreadable. 2 minutes, I said, my heart steady despite its pace. Wait for my cue. I stepped back into the dining room just as Richard tapped his glass with a spoon, drawing the room's attention in a way only he could. Right on time. Before dessert, he began, standing tall at the head of the table. I'd like to share some exciting news. Everyone turned to face him. As many of you know, Baster International has long considered expansion into Asia. I'm thrilled to announce that Trevor and our leadership have selected me to lead our new office in Singapore. There were polite congratulations and raised glasses. I noticed Christine's surprise clearly. Trevor hadn't mentioned this decision to her. Richard turned to me with a theatrical flourish. And none of this would be possible without Alexandra. She's always known her role, to manage our home while I take risks and build something bigger. The perfect partner. The guest smiled, unaware that the perfect partner had reached her breaking point. I nodded toward the kitchen. James appeared precisely on cue, carrying a silver tray with an envelope resting on top. I rose, adjusted my white suit, and stepped beside Richard. That's very gracious of you, Richard, I said clearly. But I think it's time we clarify a few things for our guests. Richard's smile stiffened. Darling, this isn't the time. Oh, I disagree. I interrupted, my voice firm. This is exactly the time. James approached and held out the tray. Richard looked confused. What's this? He asked, not taking the envelope. Mr. Richard Cowbell, James said calmly, I'm legally authorized to serve you these documents. Richard stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. What the hell is going on? These, I said, are divorce papers. I'm not going to Singapore. I'm not going anywhere with you ever again. Silence gripped the table. Richard's expression twisted from confusion to disbelief and then fury. This is insane, he said, forcing a laugh. She's always been dramatic. Please excuse us, there's no need, I said gently. Our guests should hear the truth. I've planned this for months, ever since you called me your maid at dinner. Or maybe it was when you started sleeping with Melissa. Or when I found proof that you were funneling company funds through our accounts. His face went pale. Trevor sat straighter. Alexandra, stop this now, Richard hissed. You're humiliating me. No, I said. I'm finally done letting you humiliate me. My voice was strong. For years, I stood behind you while you built your image. You treated me like furniture. I ran your home, shielded your lies, and smiled through every insult. But tonight, you don't get to control the narrative. Richard snatched the envelope and tore it open. As he scanned the first page, his jaw clenched. You won't get away with this. You're nothing without me. That's where you're wrong, I replied. The house is mine. My income surpasses yours. I've documented every transfer, every betrayal. I'm not the maid. I'm the architect of your reckoning. I turned to the stunned room. Dessert is ready. You're welcome to stay. But Richard will need to leave. He has urgent legal matters to attend to. Richard looked ready to explode, but Trevor stood up, buttoning his blazer slowly. Richard, he said with a cold professionalism, we'll talk about Singapore tomorrow. Tonight, you should go. The regional VP didn't say a word. The Japanese clients avoided eye contact, staring at their plates. No one defended him. No one moved. Richard turned to me with a face contorted in rage. This isn't over. It is, I said quietly. Completely. I walked to the entryway and opened the front door. If you need to contact me, speak to my lawyer. Diana Wells. He stormed out, the door slamming so violently behind him that the chandelier trembled, casting fractured light across the room like falling stars. The silence that followed was weightless. Then Christine stood and came over to me. Are you okay? She asked gently. I took a breath and felt it settle deep in my chest. Yes, I said, and I meant it. I turned to the guests with a real smile. Would anyone like a chocolate souffle? Unlike my husband, it's exactly what it promises to be. Alexandra has a flair for the dramatic. If you'll excuse us, there's really nothing to apologize for, Richard said with a strained smile, attempting to dismiss the tension thickening the room. But I stepped forward calmly. Actually, I've been planning this for months, I said, my voice even. Maybe it started when you called me your maid in front of your colleagues. Or maybe it was earlier, when you began sleeping with your assistant Melissa. Or maybe when you started funneling company funds into our joint accounts and thought I wouldn't notice. Richard's color drained. Trevor tensed visibly. You've made yourself abundantly clear over the years, I continued, my heart racing but my voice steady. I was your convenience, your backdrop, the polished stage that made you look good while you built a career based on lies and ego. I ran your life while you erased mine. In one quick motion, Richard lunged for the envelope and tore it open, eyes scanning the contents with growing panic. You can't do this, he hissed. You're nothing without me. I smiled, genuinely this time. That's the difference between us. You need me to look successful. I never needed you to be. I turned to the silent guests, addressing them with measured confidence. Apologies for the interruption. Dessert is excellent, and I do hope you'll stay to enjoy it. But Richard won't be joining us. He has urgent matters to discuss with his lawyer. For a split second, Richard looked ready to explode, fists clenched at his sides. Then Trevor stood, smoothing down his jacket with practiced calm. I think that would be best, Richard, he said coldly. We'll revisit Singapore and these other allegations in the office tomorrow. Richard's eyes darted from face to face, searching for allies and finding none. Even the Japanese clients were staring pointedly at their napkins, unwilling to be part of the unfolding scene. "This isn't over," he growled at me. "Actually," I said with quiet finality, "it is. The locks will be changed tomorrow. If you need to contact me, please speak with Diana Wells." And with that, he stormed out, the front door slamming so hard that the chandelier rattled, scattering fractured light across the room. Christine was the first to move. She crossed the room and gently placed a hand on my arm. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I inhaled deeply and nodded, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice.
Yes,
"I really am." I turned back to the guests with a small smile. "Who wants a chocolate souffle?" I promise it's exactly what it appears to be unlike my soon-to-be ex-husband. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by clean lines, golden light, and silence the kind that brings peace, not discomfort. The skyline stretched before me through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without asking permission. Richard was gone from every corner of my life. His suits, his sarcasm, his constant undermining had vanished.
so had his voice in my head.
The divorce was finalized in record time. Diana had cut through his games with clinical precision, leaving him no choice but to accept a settlement. His attempt to prolong the battle failed when the evidence we compiled his infidelity, financial missteps, and manipulation left him exposed. "He has bigger problems now," Diana had said with satisfaction during our final meeting. "The audit at Baster International is underway. The Singapore position? Reassigned." The irony had been sweet. Trevor had handed the role to someone more qualified, his wife, Christine. It turned out she had a background in international finance that Richard never bothered to acknowledge, and Trevor admitted they'd grown closer since that night. "We had a reckoning of our own," Christine later told me. "You held up a mirror for everyone." My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder, strategy session at 3. I smiled. My firm, Ver Consulting, was thriving. The name, inspired by the word envers meaning reverse, or backside, reflected what the business was built to do: help people and brands rebuild after collapse. My first client had been Sophia, the catering company owner. She had watched me deliver my own freedom with such composure that she'd asked me to help her rebrand. In 3 months, we transformed her business into a premium, discreet service for clients who needed events to feel effortless, even under pressure. Her bookings tripled.
The doorbell rang.
I opened it to find Megan, my sister, holding 2 fragrant bags of Thai food. "Fuel for your pre-presentation war room," she grinned, breezing past me. "Also, you look amazing. That suit is killer." "Thanks," I laughed, hugging her briefly. "It's for the Morrison pitch tonight." Megan unpacked the containers like she owned the place. "You've changed. You're not just surviving anymore. You're glowing. You know that, right?" I glanced around. The apartment was simple but elegant, curated by me alone. No one had told me what colors to avoid or which furniture was executive enough. My life felt like mine. "I think I finally believe it," I said. "It's not just that he's gone. It's that I came back." That night, as I walked into the Morrison meeting, laptop under one arm and confidence in every step, I saw it in their eyes, the same recognition I once saw in Richard's when he realized I was more than his shadow. Except this time, no one would try to dim it. I wasn't anyone's maid. I was the story they'd remember. Her practical efficiency was one of the many reasons I hired her as ERS's Director of Operations. After years of Richard's subtle manipulation to keep us apart, working alongside my sister every day felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't even realized was missing. "Frizzy?" she asked, sliding over a container of pad thai. "Prepared," I corrected, taking a bite. "There's a difference." Megan laughed, shaking her head. "Listen to me, Director. In all seriousness, I love it." As we ate, I briefed her on the upcoming Morrison presentation. The Morrison family company had been battered by public backlash following a scandal, and they'd brought in Ver Consulting to help them find their way forward. Once, facing such a high-pressure meeting would have made me question myself, Richard's voice echoing in my head. But now, all I felt was calm clarity, the quiet certainty that I knew what I was doing and, more importantly, who I was. Megan reached into her bag suddenly. Almost forgot. This came to the office for you today. She handed me an envelope addressed in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a wedding invitation from Melissa, Richard's former assistant and ex-affair partner. Tucked inside was a short handwritten note. Alexandra, you don't know me beyond what Richard probably told you, but I wanted to thank you. After you reported his behavior, I realized what I had gotten myself into. I left Baster immediately and now work somewhere that truly values my contributions. I'm marrying an amazing man who treats me like an equal. Your courage changed more lives than you know. Melissa. I handed the note to Megan, who raised an eyebrow as she read it. Well, that's unexpected, she said. Are you going to the wedding? I laughed. Absolutely not. But maybe I'll send a gift. A book on healthy boundaries. Speaking of relationships, Megan began with mock caution. Jacob from the Wilson account called 3 times yesterday. He wasn't looking for meeting details. Heat crept up my neck. Jacob Wilson, a client who'd hired us to help restore his family company's image, was sharp, kind, and surprisingly forward. He had invited me to dinner twice. I had declined both times, hiding behind professional decorum. He's a client, I reminded her. Not for long, Megan shot back. The project ends next week. Then he's just a man who clearly thinks the world of you. I busied myself straightening the takeout boxes. The idea of dating still felt like testing a frozen lake after surviving the icy depths of my marriage. I'm not ready, I admitted. Megan nodded, without pushing. When you are, if you are, that's your timeline. Not the world's. After she left for the office, I started gathering materials for the Morrison pitch. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar name cowbell. Richard's mother. I hesitated, then answered. Alexandra, I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her voice softer, more fragile than I remembered. Not at all, I said, cautious but warm. I had always liked Dane, though Richard had gradually limited our contact, claiming she was intrusive or emotionally unstable. I wanted to apologize, she said, her voice breaking. I saw what Richard did to you. It was what his father did to me for 40 years before he passed. I should have done something. Should have said something. Her vulnerability struck me hard. You don't owe me an apology, Aine. But I do, she insisted. I stayed silent because I was afraid of losing what little relationship I had with him. But seeing you walk away, that gave me courage. She told me she had sold the house, moved to Arizona to live near her sister, and was starting fresh at 68. I'm proud of you, I said through unexpected tears. That's not even the reason I called, she added. Richard showed up at my door last week. Furious-eyed, sold the house. He wanted to move in. He said he's struggling since the divorce, since Baster opened that audit. What did you say? I asked, breath held. I told him no, she said simply. For the first time in his life, I didn't rescue him.
It was terrifying.
And wonderful. We spoke for another 15 minutes, agreeing to meet the next time she visited. Another relationship returned to me. Own Richard had once tried to sever. That evening, I introduced myself to the Morrison family and their executive team with confidence and warmth. As I presented our strategy, I watched their skeptical expressions shift to thoughtful interest and then genuine engagement. Your approach is unusual, MS. Morrison said afterward, shaking my hand. Most consultants advise distraction. You suggest transparency. Transparency rebuilds trust, I said. I learned that personally. It's refreshing, she replied. And it's exactly what we need. When can you start? On the drive home, I passed the restaurant where Richard and I had celebrated our first anniversary. Once, just seeing the place would have left me breathless. But now, I only felt a flicker of something faint and distant, like recognizing a place you once visited in a dream. My phone vibrated again. A message from Diana. The judge had denied Richard's request to reopen the financial settlement. He would receive nothing more. I smiled softly and whispered to no one, "It's done." In the quiet of my apartment, I stood by the window again, looking out at the lights of a city that once felt so overwhelming. My life was mine again. I had rebuilt it from scorched earth and severed bonds. And somehow, I wasn't just standing, I was thriving. The last legal hurdle cleared. "Congratulations, you are truly free." I smiled as I read the message and, without overthinking it, dialed Jacob's number. There was a brief pause before he picked up, his voice warm with surprise. "Alexandra, what a nice surprise."
I was just thinking about you.
"Your project wraps up next week," I said, skipping the formalities. "Would you like to have dinner afterward?" There was a small silence, then a chuckle. "Not as a consultant and client?" "Not this time." "Then yes," he said. "I'd love to." "It's a date," I replied, and for the first time in a long time, the flutter I felt wasn't fear, it was anticipation. That evening, I hosted a quiet dinner at my apartment, the first since the infamous night I served Richard his freedom on a silver tray. Megan came with her husband. Christine and Trevor arrived together. Sophia from the catering company and 2 close friends from the office rounded out the group. The conversation flowed with ease. There were no careful pauses, no strategic silences, just real laughter and connection. When I brought out dessert, a homemade apple tart, I caught my reflection in the glass of the kitchen door. I barely recognized the woman smiling back at me, radiant with ease and presence. Not the polished accessory to someone else's success, but someone finally living her own. "A toast," Christine said suddenly, raising her glass, "to Alexandra, who reminded all of us what courage looks like." "To new beginnings," Trevor added. "To freedom," I said softly, clinking glasses and soaking in the warmth of the moment. Later, when the guests had gone and the apartment settled into a comfortable hush, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in months. One message. "I hear you're seeing someone again. He'll never appreciate you the way I did. We should talk. Richard." I stared at the screen for a moment. 6 months of silence, and this was what he had to offer: a tired manipulation, another attempt to make himself the center of a story that no longer belonged to him. Once a message like that would have sent me spiraling into doubt. Now, I felt only a gentle wave of pity. Not for what we'd had, but for the man still trying to control what he no longer understood. I deleted the message without responding and turned off my phone. Tomorrow was full of possibilities. New clients, new conversations, and maybe even the slow, unfolding beginning of something honest with Jacob. The future no longer felt like something to survive, it felt like something to shape. Richard had once called me a maid in front of his colleagues, a comment meant to shrink me. Instead, it triggered a transformation. I had cleaned house in every sense, sweeping away not just his presence, but the years of small doubts, quiet compliance, and the lie that I wasn't enough. I had spent so long measuring myself by someone else's yardstick that I didn't realize I had the tools to build my own world. As I prepared for bed, I paused again at the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't perfect. She bore the marks of struggle, loss, and hard-won lessons, but she was whole. She wasn't shaped by Richard's perception or anyone else's. She had to find herself on her own terms, through her decisions, her voice, her refusal to remain silent. I had served divorce papers in front of an audience, yes, but more importantly, I had served myself a life I could finally be proud of. The next morning, I woke early, stretched in a room filled with soft light, and opened the windows. The city outside buzzed with life. And this time, I was part of it, not a shadow behind someone else, not a supporting character in a man's narrative, but the author of my own story. One chapter had closed. Another was waiting. I smiled, not at the past, not at Richard, but at the future that belonged only to me. Thank you for staying with us through Alexandra's powerful journey, a story of silence turned into strength, of pain transformed into purpose. At Universe of Love and Anime, We believe every story of healing deserves to be heard, and every moment of courage, no matter how quietus, worth celebrating. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply reminded you of your own worth, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it.
You never know whose life it might change.
Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget that the most powerful love story is the one you write for yourself.